G'day viewers, how they hanging? Peter here. It's my dad's birthday today. He would have been 94. He died 2 years ago. And my dad was well versed in the matters of history, geography, philosophy. But a handyman he was not. He drove a cement mixer for 45 years, and I'm wearing his hat today. He worked for Ready Mix, and he was my dad. But anyway, let's get on this and talk about cylinder hones. Now, this is my three-legged hone. I told you the story that the bores went smaller at the bottom than they are at the top. Now, when I bought this hone, it came with stones that I'm going to call 220 grit. I subsequently found some stones at the right price that I'm going to call 320 grit. Now, the 4-stone hone, I've been machining the bores out for 180 grit. But because these stones are 4 inches long and the bore's about 4 inches, the stroke's about 4 inches, I can't favour the bottom of the bore with these. So I put the diamond wheel in my angle grinder and I machined these down to 2 inches long, not 4 inches long. Now the stones that came in here were riveted in with pins, which is a real challenge to me, so I immediately drilled the pins out and installed split pins so that I can change the stones to suit my needs. Now, I couldn't find any different grit other than those 320 grit stones in Australia to buy. But I did find online this product, which is a stone for some sort of knife sharpening apparatus, but the dimensions suited me at 6 inches long. So when I attack it with my diamond wheel, I can break it into 3 separate pieces, so that means I get three stones from a 3-legged hone for $1. So that's what I've been buying, and that seems to be working quite well. I glued these on with contact adhesive. Now I want to talk to you about my cast rings. Now, I bought cast rings deliberately, and I know there's a lot of people out there that'll say, oh, you should use molly rings, they last longer, rah, 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 I'm a wanker, blah, blah, blah. Well, those people are fucking idiots. Because, yes, all those things are true. Molly rings do last longer, but they require a very particular surface finish and honing procedure. Now, I am a backyard mechanic, I suppose you'd call me, and I seriously doubt that I would be able to obtain the appropriate surface finish for molly rings, whereas cast rings, very forgiving. You can almost have any surface finish. I could just simply use these stones that came with the hone, which I think are about 220, run that through, and the cast rings would be happy to mate to whatever surface finish is there. They are very forgiving. So that's why I chose to use cast rings. Now my plan is I will probably try and do something a little bit like a plateau hone. I will try and get something like 150 grit stones to get that surface finish, and then I will run these 320s down at the full 4-inch length. Just give them a bit of a wipe with the 320s, and that will give me a little bit of a plateau hone, and that's my plan to attempt that. Now I do have a divot in number 1. You'll remember that number 1 bore was the one that had the melted piston, and there's a divot up near the top, I think between the 2 rings, the top dead centre, and it is about 1.5 thou deep, and I'm not going to be able to machine that out, or not without going to a 78, getting it rebored to 78 millimeters, and that would finish the block then. That is your last rebore. So I'm loath to do that. So my plan at the moment is to leave that divot in number 1. I'm happy to show you when I've got the camera over there in a future video, the divot, but I've just got to accept that I can't get that out. So we're going to have to live with that, fellas. I also need to talk to you about compression height. Now the pistons need to be machined. Now I can't machine the pistons till I know what the final bore is, and I don't know that yet because I want to make all 4 the same. So once I get that number, then I know that I've got to take about 2 mil off the top of the pistons, but I don't know the exact number of that. But once I get to that point, I'll calculate the compression height that I want, because originally the motor was 14:1, which is nowhere near appropriate for my needs. So once I calculate that, then I can get the pistons machined, because I'll know the compression height and I'll know the diameter. I'll probably make a video with my thoughts on that in the future. What else can I tell you? That's about all I needed to talk about that. But you might be interested in this little, here is my Thor. It's a lovely little plastic faced hammer that I found on a rubbish pile out the front of somebody's house that was going to the tip. Now that was about 10 years ago, and I found this, and it's a Thor made in England, and it weighs about 1.5 kilos or 3 pounds, so it's a beautiful little hammer. But obviously somebody threw it out because they didn't have the plastic faces for it. So last week I went to the tool shop. I thought I'll buy some plastic faces, and I found them. They were down there, Thor brand, exactly the right size and thread to fit into this hammer, and it was $42 for a pair of 2. And I thought, well, that was a ridiculous price. So I looked up in the rack, and to buy the whole hammer with the 2 plastic heads was $49. So of course a smart fella would have bought the hammer. But I also know myself, and I thought, well, when I get home I'm going to have a hammer with 2 plastic faces and then another hammer with no plastic faces, and I'll still be pissed off about that. So I rummaged through my stock and I looked for a piece of nylon, and I didn't have one. But I did find this piece of polyurethane. And I thought, well, that's what I've got. So then I rang up my friend George and said, have you got a 20mm die with a 2.5 pitch? And he went out in the shed and said, yes, I have. So I thought, beauty. So then I spun this up in the lathe, and I've got the 20mm at either end, as you can see, and a split in the middle. And I'm going to take it to my friend George's house, and we're going to cut those threads on the end and then split it down the middle, and then I'll have 2 plastic faces. Now, how long will HDPE last? It's not my first choice material, but it's all I've got, so we're going to give that a go. And the next thing, well, I suppose that's all really. So before I sign off, I'd just like you guys to consider this. If you were walking, first off, have a look at my shirt. Let's have a look at my shirt. I don't know if you can see that. That's my shirt that I'm wearing today because I'm working in the shed. Now, if you were walking down the street and you saw a man walking towards you wearing that shirt, there's a percentage of the population that would think, gee, that man's poor. And then there's a smaller group of people that would think that man doesn't care about himself. And then there's a smaller group of people that would think that man's mentally deficient. And there's a smaller group of people that would think that man's been grinding a job in his vice at home. And I just ask you to contemplate, which group of people would you choose to be in? Well, I'm going to end it there. So, uru fellas, and I'll see you next time.